You wake at precisely 500 hours, as you have for the past 34 years. The habit block's recycled air carries the familiar scent of sanctified incense, pumped through the ventilation systems to ensure even your dreams remain pure. Your bare feet touch the cold plasticrete floor, and you kneel immediately beside your cot, hands clasped in perfect devotion. The words flow from your lips like water from a blessed fountain. Emperor protect, Emperor preserve, Emperor guide my thoughts to righteousness. Your name is Matthias Korven, Servitor Prime of Administratum Station Gamma 7 on the agri-world of Sanctus Verdant. You are nothing special. You are everything the Imperium of man was designed to create: a perfect citizen, a faithful servant, a living prayer made flesh. The morning ablutions are ritual, not routine. Cold water, blessed by the local confessor, washes away the night's impurities. You dress in the same regulation brown robes you've worn for decades, fingering the prayer beads at your waist, each one carved from the bones of imperial martyrs, each one a promise of your devotion. The mirror shows you a face unmarked by doubt or sin, brown eyes that have never looked upon forbidden sights, hands that have never touched what they shouldn't, lips that have never whispered heretical thoughts. Your marriage to sanctified wife Lydia was arranged by the ecclesiarchy when you both turned 25, the optimal age for imperial breeding protocols. She is a good woman, pious and dutiful, her womb blessed by the local shrine. Your coupling is scheduled, sanctioned, and spiritually pure. 3 children have resulted from your union, each one raised in the Emperor's light, each one destined for greater service than your own humble station allows. The walk to your workplace takes exactly 17 minutes through corridors lined with imperial propaganda and devotional murals. You pass the same faces you've seen for years: Servitor Secondary Helena with her quiet prayers, Tech Adept Marcus with his blessed augmetics, sanctified wife Evangeline with her proud belly swollen with imperial offspring. Everyone nods respectfully. Everyone knows their place. Everyone serves the Emperor's will. This is paradise, citizen. This is what 10,000 years of imperial doctrine has created: a world where hunger is satisfied, where purpose is clear, where every citizen knows exactly who they are and what they must do. No chaos, no uncertainty, number confusion until this morning, until 8:47 hours, until the moment that changes everything. Your reviewing grain distribution reports blessed work that feeds the Imperium's countless billions when she enters the chamber. Servitor Secondary Amara. You've seen her before, of course. She works in subsection Delta, processing livestock tallies, a perfectly ordinary imperial citizen with regulation brown hair and properly modest robes, sanctified wife to someone in the merchant quarter, mother to imperial children, nothing remarkable, except for the way the artificial light catches the curve of her neck as she bends over her data slate, except for the soft sound she makes when concentrating, a small, unconscious hum that sends something electric down your spine, except for the moment when she looks up from her work and her eyes meet yours across the chamber, and something passes between you that has nothing to do with duty, devotion, or the Emperor's will. Your breath catches. Your hands tremble. The grain reports blur before your eyes as blood rushes to places it shouldn't, as thoughts form that have never existed in your mind before. She smiles, just a small, polite acknowledgement of your presence, and the world tilts sideways. What is happening to you? You try to return your attention to the reports, but the numbers swim meaninglessly across the page. Your heart hammers against your ribs with a rhythm that has nothing to do with physical exertion. Every few seconds, your eyes drift back to her, cataloging details you have no right to notice. The way her fingers grip the stylus, the small mole at the base of her throat, the suggestion of curves beneath her modest robes. This is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. You are a married man, sanctified in the Emperor's sight. Your desires are properly channeled, your lusts appropriately directed. You have never felt anything like this sick, twisting heat in your belly, this urgent need to what? You don't even have words for what your body is suddenly demanding. The workday continues around you in its blessed routine, but you exist in a bubble of mounting panic. Every time she moves, every time she speaks to a colleague, every time she exists in your peripheral vision, the wrongness grows stronger. By midday meal, your hands are shaking so badly you can barely hold your nutrition paste. By evening prayers, sweat beads on your forehead despite the chamber's regulation temperature. You try to pray the feeling away. Kneeling in the shrine after work, surrounded by the familiar scents of sanctified oils and burning purity seals, you whisper desperate entreaties to the Emperor. Cleanse my thoughts, my Lord. Purify my heart. Make me worthy of your divine light. The golden Aquila stares down at you with cold judgment, and for the first time in your life, you wonder if it sees the corruption growing in your soul. The walk home is torture. Every step takes you past the merchant quarter where she lives with her sanctified husband and blessed children. You don't know which hab unit is hers. You don't want to know. But your feet slow as you pass each doorway, and part of you, a part that disgusts and terrifies you, hopes for a glimpse of her through a window. Lydia notices immediately. Your sanctified wife has known you for 14 years, and she sees the distraction in your eyes, the way your hands fumble with your evening meal, the distance in your responses to her gentle conversation about the children's progress in imperial doctrine. She doesn't question you directly, that would be improper, but concern creases her brow as she watches you struggle with thoughts you cannot share. That night, lying in your narrow cot beside your sleeping wife, you stare at the ceiling and confront the truth that makes your blood run cold. You want another woman, not with the sanctified desire of an imperial citizen seeking genetic compatibility or spiritual completion. You want her with a hunger that burns in your chest and coils in your loins like a living thing. You want to touch her skin, to hear her voice speak your name, to lose yourself in pleasures that exist far beyond the boundaries of imperial approval. You want to commit heresy. The word hangs in the darkness of your mind like a death sentence. Because you know, with the certainty of 34 years of imperial education, what happens to citizens who harbor such thoughts. You've seen the penitent engines stalking through the main thoroughfares, their barely human occupants screaming eternal agony through vox grills. You've watched servitors go about their duties with dead eyes and lobotomized souls. You've heard whispers of worse fates, of demon possession, of corruption so complete that death becomes a mercy. And yet the hunger doesn't fade. If anything, the fear makes it stronger, more urgent, more impossibly necessary. You close your eyes and try to summon the image of the Emperor in his glory, the master of mankind who sacrifices himself daily for humanity's survival. Instead, you see brown eyes and soft curves and skin that you have no right to imagine touching. What happens when a loyal imperial citizen's heart rebels against everything he's been taught? What happens when human nature itself becomes the enemy? What happens when the very thoughts that make you human mark you for damnation? In the darkness of your hab unit, surrounded by the sleeping forms of your sanctified family, you realize with growing horror that you're about to find out. The Emperor protects, citizen. But what happens when you need protection from yourself? The next morning brings the familiar comfort of structure, but beneath the routine lurks a new and terrible awareness. As you recite your morning prayers, the words feel different in your mouth, not lies, exactly, but incomplete truths that fail to address what's happening inside your mind. Guide my thoughts to righteousness, you whisper, and wonder if the Emperor can hear the desperation in your voice. You see the control systems of your world with new eyes now, as if yesterday's revelation has stripped away a veil you never knew existed. The Imperium doesn't simply govern its citizens' actions. It seeks to regulate their very hearts, to ensure that even desire itself serves the Emperor's will. Consider the system that shaped your marriage to Lydia. At age 24, you both reported to the local administratum for genetic and spiritual evaluation. Your bloodlines were traced back 7 generations, checking for signs of mutation, heresy, or insufficient devotion. Your physical compatibility was assessed through medical examination and prayer-guided divination. Most importantly, your spiritual resonance was measured, the degree to which your souls would create offspring worthy of imperial service. The process took 3 months. 3 months of interviews with confessors, physical examinations by medici priests, and psychological evaluations designed to root out any hint of deviation from imperial norm. You remember feeling grateful for the thoroughness, proud that the Imperium cared enough to ensure the purity of your union. Now you realize what you were truly witnessing, the complete systematization of human life. The Crimson Protocols, referenced in hushed whispers by citizens, but never fully explained, govern every aspect of sanctified intimacy. Sexual congress must occur only between properly married citizens, only for the purpose of procreation or specifically sanctioned conjugal duty, and only in positions and practices approved by the ecclesiarchy. Pleasure beyond the minimum necessary for successful reproduction is viewed with suspicion. Excessive enthusiasm, even within marriage, can be grounds for moral investigation. You've never questioned these restrictions before. Why would you? They ensure purity, prevent corruption, maintain the spiritual health of humanity. But now, with forbidden thoughts burning in your mind, you begin to understand the true scope of what the Imperium demands. It doesn't simply want obedience. It wants the complete elimination of the unpredictable, the spontaneous, the genuinely human. The confession booths stand at regular intervals throughout your district, tall wooden structures marked with the aquila and equipped with internal vox recorders. Every citizen is required to confess weekly, purging their thoughts of impurity and receiving spiritual guidance from the local confessor. You've sat in those cramped wooden chambers thousands of times, reciting minor sins and receiving minor penances. Small doubts about work assignments, momentary irritation with your children, the occasional prideful thought about your efficiency ratings. Today, for the first time, you understand what those booths truly represent. They are not places of spiritual healing. They are interrogation chambers, designed to extract confession before corruption can take root. The confessors don't simply offer advice. They hunt for signs of deviation, cataloging every admitted sin and mapping the spiritual health of their flock with the precision of an imperial tactical analysis. Your mandatory confession is scheduled for this afternoon. The thought makes your stomach clench with terror. How can you kneel in that wooden cell and lie to a servant of the Emperor? But how can you tell the truth about the thoughts that have consumed your mind for barely 24 hours? The workday passes in a haze of mounting anxiety. Every time you see Amara, and your traitorous eyes seek her out constantly now, the wrongness inside you grows stronger. She nods politely when your paths cross. She offers the same quiet greeting she's given you for years. She has no idea that her mere existence has become a source of spiritual torment that threatens everything you've ever believed about yourself. But others are beginning to notice your distraction. Servitor Secondary Marcus comments on your unusually low productivity. Your immediate superior, Administratum Prime Corvus, makes a note in your efficiency file. These are not idle observations. In the Imperium, a citizen's performance is monitored constantly, and sudden changes in behavior trigger automatic investigation protocols. You realize with growing dread that your spiritual crisis is becoming visible to others. In a society built on conformity and predictability, even small deviations draw attention. How long before someone recommends you for enhanced spiritual guidance? How long before your confession booth visits become interrogation sessions? The afternoon confession approaches like an execution. You kneel in the familiar wooden cell, breathing the scent of sanctified oils and listening to the soft whisper of the confessor settling on the other side of the grill. Father Dimitri has guided your spiritual development for over a decade. His voice is kind but firm, weathered by years of hearing humanity's small sins and offering the Emperor's forgiveness. "Speak, my child," he says, and the familiar ritual begins. You recite your prepared list of minor transgressions, the same sort of petty failings that have marked your confessions for years. Work completed with insufficient enthusiasm, momentary envy of a colleague's promotion, Brief irritation at your youngest child's questions during evening prayer. Each admission feels like swallowing broken glass. Is there anything else troubling your spirit? Father Dimitri asks, and you hear something in his voice, a subtle sharpening, a hunter's instinct detecting hidden prey. Confessors are trained to recognize the signs of concealed sin, to spot the hesitation that indicates deeper corruption. Your mouth opens, closes. The truth hovers on your tongue like poison. I want another woman. I think about her constantly. I dream of touching her skin and hearing her voice whisper my name in the darkness. I am becoming something monstrous and I don't know how to stop it. No, Father, you whisper. The Emperor's light guides my thoughts. The lie burns your throat as you speak it. On the other side of the grill, you hear Father Dimitri make a small note on his data slate, recording your words, filing them in the vast network of spiritual surveillance that monitors every citizen's moral health. Your penance is light 50 repetitions of the litany of purity and an additional hour of evening devotion. As you kneel in the shrine afterward, mechanically reciting the familiar words, you realize that you've crossed another line. You've lied to a confessor. You've actively concealed sin from the Emperor's representatives. The corruption is spreading. That evening, Lydia serves the family meal with her usual quiet efficiency. Your children chatter about their lessons in Imperial doctrine, proudly reciting the day's catechisms. Your youngest daughter, barely 6 years old, raises her small hands in the sign of the Aquila and declares her intention to serve the Emperor until death. The scene should fill you with pride and contentment. Instead, it feels like watching your life through a window, observing someone else's happiness from a distance that grows wider with each passing hour. After the children are asleep, Lydia approaches you with careful concern. You seem troubled, husband, she says, using the formal address that marks all sanctified marriages. Perhaps additional prayer would bring you peace. You look at your wife, good, faithful Lydia, who has never harbored an improper thought in her life, and feel the weight of your isolation settle around you like a shroud. She cannot understand what's happening to you because she has never experienced anything like it. Her desires have always aligned perfectly with Imperial doctrine. Her heart has never rebelled against the sacred order that shapes their lives. I am well, you tell her, and add another lie to the growing list. The Emperor's light sustains me. She smiles and kisses your forehead with chaste affection, before retiring to her own cot. You lie awake in the darkness, listening to her peaceful breathing and contemplating the terrible machinery of control that surrounds you. The Imperium has built a system so comprehensive, so totalitarian in its reach, that it seeks to govern not just actions but thoughts, not just behavior but the deepest stirrings of the human heart. And you're beginning to understand why such control is necessary. Because what you're feeling, this hunger, this desperate need, this rebellion of flesh against spirit, doesn't exist in isolation. If you can harbor such thoughts, so can others. If the sacred order can crack in your heart, it can crumble anywhere. The Imperium's harsh restrictions aren't cruelty, they're necessity. They're all that stands between humanity and the chaos that lurks in every unguarded moment. But knowing why the chains exist doesn't make them any less heavy. And understanding the necessity of your cage doesn't make you any less desperate to escape it. In the darkness, as you listen to your sanctified wife's peaceful dreams, you realize that tomorrow will bring new temptations, new opportunities to fail. The hunger inside you isn't fading, it's growing stronger with each passing hour. What happens when the system designed to prevent corruption creates the very conditions for your fall? What happens when the cure becomes worse than the disease? What happens when you realize that in the grim darkness of the far future, even your thoughts belong to the Emperor, and yours are no longer pure enough to offer? 3 weeks pass. 3 weeks of escalating internal warfare, of prayers that feel increasingly hollow, of lies that come easier with each repetition. You tell yourself you're fighting the corruption, resisting the wrongness that threatens to consume you. But deep in your heart, where the Emperor's light struggles to penetrate, you know the truth. You're not fighting the desire, you're feeding it. It begins with small compromises. You volunteer for supply runs that take you past the merchant quarter. You time your lunch break to coincide with hers, positioning yourself where you can observe her without appearing to do so. You memorize her schedule with the dedication you once reserved for Imperial doctrine, cataloging every detail of her daily routine like a forbidden prayer. Your productivity at work suffers as more of your mental energy becomes consumed by thoughts of Amara. The grain distribution reports that once represented blessed service to the Imperium now feel like meaningless obstacles preventing you from pursuing your true purpose. You catch yourself staring at nothing, lost in fantasies that grow more detailed and more damning with each passing day. The additional prayer sessions you've imposed on yourself as penance have the opposite of their intended effect. Kneeling before the golden aquila, trying to purge your mind of corruption, you find instead that the intensity of your spiritual focus somehow amplifies the forbidden thoughts. The Emperor's stern visage watches as your mind wanders to imagined conversations with Amara, to scenarios where duty and doctrine matter less than the terrible hunger gnawing at your soul. You begin to research. Not openly, that would be suicide, but through careful queries in the vast databases of Imperial knowledge. You tell yourself you're seeking understanding, looking for guidance on overcoming temptation. What you actually do is hunt for loopholes, for technicalities in Imperial doctrine that might justify what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you know you're going to do. The legal texts are maddeningly vague in some areas and brutally specific in others. Adultery between sanctified citizens is heresy punishable by servitorization or worse. Inappropriate congress with unmarried persons carries penalties ranging from re-education to penitent engine conscription. Unlawful desires can result in chemical castration and permanent psychological monitoring. But what constitutes unlawful desire? Where exactly is the line between natural human feeling and corruption worthy of punishment? The more you research, the more you realize that the imperial system deliberately maintains ambiguity in these areas. Citizens are expected to err on the side of caution, to police their own thoughts so thoroughly that questions of exact boundaries never arise. You're asking the wrong questions, and you know it. Late one evening, after your family has retired and the Hab unit stands silent around you, you access a restricted section of the Imperial database using your administratum credentials. Your hands shake as you navigate to theological treatises on human nature and spiritual corruption. You're looking for something, anything, that might explain what's happening to you without condemning you to damnation. What you find is worse than condemnation. You find understanding. The texts speak of human nature as inherently flawed, of desires that exist independent of reason or righteousness. They acknowledge that the Imperium's restrictions run counter to deep biological and psychological drives, and they explain why such restrictions are necessary. Humans, left to their natural inclinations, invariably fall into patterns that strengthen chaos and weaken the species' ability to survive. But buried in the theological arguments, you discover something that chills your blood: the recognition that some citizens will inevitably fail to maintain the required purity. The system accounts for this. The punishments, the monitoring, the constant surveillance, these aren't just deterrents. They're processing mechanisms designed to identify and deal with citizens whose nature proves incompatible with imperial requirements. You are not the first to feel what you're feeling. You are not unique in your corruption. You are simply the latest in an endless stream of failures that the Imperium expects and prepares for. The realization should terrify you. Instead, it fills you with a perverse kind of relief. If your corruption is inevitable, if the system expects and accounts for your failure, then perhaps the fault lies not in your individual weakness but in the impossible standards themselves. This thought, this moment of shifting blame from yourself to the system that created you, marks your true fall. Not into action, not yet, but into the mindset that will make action inevitable. The next day, you do something unprecedented. You speak to her. It happens during the midday meal period. You're walking past the nutrition dispensary when you see Amara struggling with a malfunctioning food processor. The machine has jammed, and she's attempting to clear the blockage with growing frustration. For weeks, you've fantasized about moments like this, opportunities to approach her naturally, to begin the conversation that your corrupted heart demands. "Allow me," you say, stepping forward before rational thought can stop you. She looks up, and for the first time in your life, you're close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to smell the faint scent of sanctified soap on her skin, close enough to hear the soft intake of breath as she recognizes your offer of assistance. "Thank you, Servitor Prime," she says, stepping aside to give you room to work. Your hands tremble as you reach for the processor's control panel. Not from nervousness about the repair. You've maintained similar machines countless times, but from the overwhelming reality of her presence. She's standing so close that you can feel the warmth radiating from her body, can hear the soft rustle of her robes with each breath. The repair takes 3 minutes. 3 minutes of careful work while she watches, occasionally offering grateful comments about your skill with Imperial machinery. 3 minutes that feel simultaneously eternal and far too brief. When the processor hums back to life, dispensing her nutrition paste in regulation portions, you feel a stab of loss at the excuse's end. "The Emperor's blessing on your kindness," she says, offering the formal thanks appropriate between citizens. You should respond with equally formal courtesy. You should nod politely and continue about your daily routine. You should allow this interaction to end as simply and properly as it began. Instead, you say, "Perhaps I could check the other processors in your work section. These older models are prone to similar failures." It's a perfectly reasonable offer. Equipment maintenance falls within your administrative purview, and preventing breakdowns serves the Imperium's efficiency. There's nothing improper about the suggestion itself, but you both know that's not why you're making it. Something passes between you in the silence that follows, a moment of mutual recognition that transcends the formal boundaries of Imperial citizenship. She understands what you're really asking, and after a heartbeat that seems to stretch across eternity, she nods. "That would be most helpful," she says. "Station Delta 7 has been experiencing frequent malfunctions." You spend the afternoon in her work section, ostensibly maintaining equipment, but actually creating excuses to talk with her. You learn that she's originally from a mining world 3 systems away, that she married her sanctified husband through the same arrangement system that paired you with Lydia, that she has 2 children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 5, both properly enrolled in Imperial educational programs. You also learn that she laughs at your carefully constructed jokes about administratum bureaucracy, that she listens with genuine interest when you explain the complexities of supply chain management, that she occasionally touches your arm when making a point, brief contacts that send electricity racing through your nervous system. Nothing improper occurs. By any objective standard, you've simply had a series of professional conversations with a colleague while performing legitimate maintenance duties. But both of you know that something fundamental has changed. Lines have been crossed, even if they were invisible lines marked only in the secret geography of the heart. That evening, lying in your cot beside your sleeping wife, you replay every moment of the interaction. Every word Amara spoke, every gesture she made, every instant when her attention focused entirely on you. The memory burns in your mind with an intensity that makes sleep impossible. You've taken the first step into damnation, and it felt like coming home. What happens when the thing you know will destroy you is the only thing that makes you feel truly alive? What happens when righteousness becomes the enemy of happiness, and corruption offers the only path to joy? What happens when you realize that your first taste of sin was everything you never knew you were missing? In the darkness, as you plan tomorrow's excuses to see her again, you understand that there will be no turning back. The hunger has tasted satisfaction, and it will never again be content with starvation. The spiral has begun, and gravity is taking hold. 2 months after that first conversation, you no longer recognize the person you've become. The change isn't visible to casual observation. You still perform your duties, attend prayers, maintain the facade of proper imperial citizenship. But inside, where thoughts once flowed in orderly channels sanctioned by the ecclesiarchy, something alien has taken root and begun to grow. Your daily interactions with Amara have evolved from professional necessity into elaborate justifications for spending time together. Equipment maintenance requests that conveniently require your expertise. Supply distribution queries that demand in-person consultation. Schedule coordination meetings that somehow extend far beyond their stated purpose. Both of you participate in this careful dance of rationalization, finding new ways to create legitimate reasons for illegitimate desires. The conversations have deepened, moved beyond the safe boundaries of work-related topics into dangerous territory. You know about her childhood on the mining world, about the parents she lost in a tunnel collapse when she was 16, about the dreams she once harbored of joining the Imperial Guard before genetic testing deemed her more valuable in administrative service. She knows about your own carefully edited history, selected details that paint you as more interesting than the dutiful cipher you've always been. But it's not just what you say to each other, it's how you say it. The way her voice softens when she speaks your name. The way she leans closer when discussing technical matters, close enough that you can count the individual lashes framing her eyes. The way conversations that should last 5 minutes stretch to 30, 40, an hour as both of you find excuses to delay the moment of parting. You're falling in love, and in the Imperium of man, love itself can be heresy. The physical changes begin subtly. You start paying more attention to your appearance, taking extra care with your morning ablutions, ensuring your robes are properly pressed and your prayer beads polished to a shine. You catch yourself checking your reflection in the polished surfaces around your workplace, something you've never done in 34 years of Imperial service. Sleep becomes increasingly difficult. Hours pass as you lie awake constructing elaborate fantasies about Amara, not just physical intimacy, though those thoughts grow more detailed and demanding with each passing night, but scenarios of emotional connection. Conversations where you tell her things you've never shared with another living soul. Moments of understanding that transcend the rigid formalities of imperial social structure. Dreams of a life where you could love her openly, without fear of punishment or shame. These fantasies begin to bleed into your waking hours. During morning prayers, instead of contemplating the Emperor's divine glory, you imagine Amara kneeling beside you, her voice joining yours in perfect harmony. At work, you find yourself staring at nothing while constructing elaborate scenarios where circumstances force you to protect her from danger, where heroic action demonstrates the depth of your devotion. The hunger is changing too, becoming something more complex and more dangerous. What began as simple attraction has evolved into obsession, a need so fundamental that it seems to reshape your understanding of what it means to be alive. Hours away from her feel like punishment. Days when work prevents your usual interactions leave you irritable and distracted. You begin to structure your entire existence around the moments when you can be in her presence. Your family notices the change, though they lack the context to understand what they're observing. Lydia comments on your restlessness, your tendency to pace the hab unit during evening prayers. Your children ask why you seem distant during their bedtime stories, why your attention wanders when they recite their daily catechisms. You reassure them with increasingly hollow words about work pressures and spiritual contemplation. The lies come easier now. Not just the major deceptions, your growing emotional infidelity, your elaborate justifications for spending time with Amara, but the small everyday untruths that oil the machinery of your double life. Explanations for your improved appearance, reasons for your changed routines, excuses for the distraction that makes you miss family meals and forget important conversations. Each lie makes the next one easier. Each deception builds the foundation for greater betrayals. 3 months in, something happens that should terrify you, but instead fills you with dark exhilaration. You're working late in the archives, officially processing quarterly supply reports, but actually extending your day in hopes of encountering Amara during her evening rounds. The building is nearly empty, most citizens long departed for evening prayers and family time. When she appears in the doorway of your workstation, you feel your heart slam against your ribs with an intensity that makes you dizzy. She's carrying a data slate, ostensibly delivering end-of-day reports, but you both know that's not why she's here. "I thought you might still be working," she says, and there's something in her voice you've never heard before, a quality that bypasses your rational mind and speaks directly to the hunger that has consumed your thoughts for months. "The Emperor's work is never finished," you reply, offering the standard response, but your voice sounds strange in your own ears. She steps into your workstation, closing the door behind her. It's perfectly proper. Citizens often close doors to avoid disturbing others with work-related discussions. But the soft click of the latch seems to echo in the small space with the finality of a prison door closing. For long seconds, you simply look at each other. The pretense of data slate delivery hangs between you like a transparent barrier, obvious fiction that neither of you bothers to maintain. Her breathing is slightly elevated, her pupils dilated in the chamber's dim lighting. You can see the pulse beating rapidly in the hollow of her throat. "We shouldn't be here," she whispers, but she doesn't move toward the door. "No," you agree, but you stand and step closer to where she waits. The space between you closes gradually, each movement a choice, each inch a small betrayal of everything you've been taught to value. When you're close enough to feel her breath on your face, close enough to see your own reflection in her eyes, you understand that you've reached the point of no return. Your hand rises to touch her cheek, and she doesn't pull away. Her skin is warm and impossibly soft, nothing like the sterile perfection of Imperial propaganda, but gloriously, chaotically human. She leans into your touch with a small sound that might be relief or surrender or recognition. "This is heresy," you breathe, and the word that should sound like condemnation tastes like salvation on your tongue. "I know," she whispers back, and then her lips are against yours and the last pretense of righteousness burns away in the fire of finally giving in to what you've wanted since that first moment in the nutrition dispensary. The kiss lasts perhaps 10 seconds. 10 seconds of soft warmth and shared breath and the taste of another person's desire. 10 seconds that rewrite your understanding of what it means to be alive. When you part, both of you are trembling. "We can't," she says, but her hands are fisted in the fabric of your robes, holding you close instead of pushing you away. "I know," you reply, but you're already leaning in for another kiss, already lost to the gravity of what you've discovered in her arms. The encounter goes no further. Not that night. But as you walk home through darkened corridors, your lips still tingling with the memory of her touch, you understand that everything has changed. The hunger has tasted satisfaction and found it intoxicating. The corruption has moved from thought to action, and there will be no containing it now. That night, you lie in your cot beside your sleeping wife and feel the full weight of what you've become. Adulterer, heretic, traitor to the Emperor's trust and your family's love. The words should crush you with shame, but instead they sing in your blood like wine. You've crossed the line from fantasy to reality, and reality is more intoxicating than any dream. You've tasted what lies beyond the boundaries of imperial approval and found it worth any price. You've learned that corruption doesn't announce itself with fanfare and dramatic revelation. It seduces with gentle whispers and moments of perfect, terrible joy. In the darkness, as you plan your next encounter with the woman who has become the center of your universe, you realize that you no longer care about the consequences. The hunger has grown too strong, the need too fundamental. Whatever punishment awaits discovery pales beside the agony of voluntary abstinence. What happens when sin becomes the only thing that makes you feel truly alive? What happens when heresy offers more comfort than holiness? What happens when you realize that you'd rather be damned with her than saved without her? Tomorrow, you tell yourself, you'll find the strength to resist. Tomorrow, you'll remember your duties and your faith and your family. But deep in your heart, where the corruption has taken root and begun to flower, you know that tomorrow will only bring new opportunities to fall further, and you're already planning how to take them. 6 months. 6 months of stolen moments and hidden meetings, of elaborate deceptions and growing recklessness. 6 months of transformation from dutiful imperial citizen to something unrecognizable. The affair, because that's what it has become, despite all your careful rationalizations, has consumed your life like a slow-burning fire. You should have been more careful. You should have recognized the signs that others were beginning to notice. You should have understood that in the Imperium of man, nothing remains hidden forever. The investigation begins on a Tuesday morning that seems no different from any other. You arrive at your workstation to find Administratum Prime Corvus waiting with a data slate and an expression of carefully neutral concern. Behind him stands a figure that makes your blood turn to ice water, Confessor Militant Thaddeus, a severe man whose presence in administrative areas means only one thing: someone has sinned, someone is being investigated, someone's carefully constructed life is about to crumble. Servitor Prime Matthias, Korven says, his voice carrying the formal tone reserved for official proceedings. You are requested to accompany Confessor Militant Thaddeus for spiritual consultation. The words hit you like physical blows. Spiritual consultation. Not confession, not routine moral guidance, but consultation. The euphemism used when citizens are suspected of serious doctrinal deviation. Your legs nearly give out as the full implications cascade through your mind. They know. Somehow, impossibly, they know. The walk to the ecclesiarchy building passes in a blur of mounting terror. Citizens step aside to let your small procession pass, their eyes carefully averted from what everyone recognizes as an arrest in all but name. You catch glimpses of familiar faces, colleagues, neighbors, people who have known you for years, and see the mixture of shock and careful distance that marks someone whose association with you might now be dangerous. The interrogation chamber is exactly what you expected, and somehow worse than your worst nightmares. A sterile room dominated by imperial iconography, with recording equipment that documents every word and servoskulls that monitor every micro-expression. The chair you're directed to is uncomfortable by design, positioned under harsh lumens that make concealment impossible. Confessor Militant Thaddeus settles across from you with the patience of a predator who knows his prey is already trapped. His augmetic eye whirs softly as it focuses on your face, scanning for the bioindicators that reveal deception. When he speaks, his voice carries the authority of absolute faith backed by absolute power. Matthias Korven, Servitor Prime of Station Gamma 7, he begins, consulting a data slate thick with information. Married 14 years to sanctified wife Lydia. Father to 3 children, all properly registered in imperial educational programs. Performance ratings consistently above standard. No prior incidents of spiritual deviation. He pauses, letting the weight of your previously spotless record settle in the chamber's stifling air. Until recently. The words hang between you like an execution order. Your mouth is desert dry, your heart hammering so violently you're certain the servoskulls must be detecting the elevated rhythm. When you try to speak, only a croak emerges. I don't understand, Confessor Militant. His smile is thin and utterly without warmth. Don't you? Perhaps I should be more specific. In the past 6 months, your productivity has declined by 12%. Your confession sessions have become notably brief and perfunctory. You've been observed in extended private conversations with Servitor Secondary Amara Voss, including several instances where both of you were alone in sealed chambers after normal work hours. Each accusation hits like a lash across your soul. They know everything, not just the broad outline of your transgression, but specific details that make clear how thoroughly you've been monitored. In the Imperium, privacy is an illusion, and you've been living under surveillance so complete that even your most carefully hidden moments were recorded and analyzed. Furthermore, Thaddeus continues, your wife has reported changes in your behavior consistent with spiritual corruption, restlessness during prayer, distraction during family meals, a notable decrease in conjugal attention, suggesting your desires have been improperly redirected. The betrayal cuts deeper than all the rest. Lydia Faithful, trusting Lydia, has reported you to the authorities, not from malice but from the same devotion that has guided her entire life. In her mind, she's trying to save your soul by exposing your sin before it can damn you completely. She doesn't understand that it's already too late for salvation. Now, Thaddeus says, leaning forward with predatory intensity, you will confess the full extent of your corruption. Leave nothing out. The Emperor's mercy extends to those who repent honestly, but his wrath burns eternal for those who compound sin with deception. What follows is the longest 6 hours of your life. Thaddeus is not merely a confessor but a trained interrogator, skilled in the psychological techniques that strip away lies and expose the raw truth beneath. He builds his case methodically, presenting evidence you never knew existed, revealing the depth of surveillance that monitored your every move. They have vid captures of your private conversations with Amara, audio recordings of words you thought were whispered too quietly for anyone to hear, biometric analysis showing your elevated stress responses whenever she entered a room, even thermal imaging that tracked the increased blood flow during your clandestine meetings. In the Imperium, even your body betrays you. Under this relentless pressure, your resistance crumbles. You confess to the emotional affair, to the stolen kisses, to the elaborate deceptions that allowed your relationship to continue. You admit to lying during previous confessions, to harboring impure thoughts, to allowing corruption to take root in your heart. Each admission feels like tearing away a piece of your soul, but the alternative, continued resistance in the face of overwhelming evidence, would result in far worse consequences. But Thaddeus isn't finished. As your confessions pile up, his questioning takes a darker turn. He wants to know about others who might be similarly corrupted. He probes for signs of organized heresy, of cult activity, of connections to chaos worship that might explain your fall from grace. Corruption rarely occurs in isolation, he explains, his augmetic eye focusing on your face with mechanical precision. Citizens who fall to one form of heresy often harbor others. Your desires for this woman, are they natural in origin, or have you been exposed to influences that encourage such feelings? The question terrifies you because you don't know the answer. Has your attraction to Amara been entirely natural, or has something else been whispering in your mind? Have your dreams been your own, or has some malevolent force been shaping your thoughts? In the Imperium, the line between human weakness and supernatural corruption is often impossible to distinguish. Hours pass. Your voice grows hoarse from confession after confession, each revelation dragging you deeper into the pit you've dug for yourself. When Thaddeus finally declares the session complete, you're mentally and emotionally exhausted, hollowed out by the process of laying your soul bare before imperial judgment. But your ordeal is far from over. As you're escorted to a holding cell to await final sentencing, you catch a glimpse through a window of another familiar figure being led into the building. Amara, her face pale with terror, flanked by Arbites in full combat gear. They've arrested her too. Your corruption has not only damned yourself but the woman you've come to love. The realization hits you like a physical blow, doubling you over with anguish that has nothing to do with your own fate and everything to do with hers. This is what heresy truly costs, not just your own soul, but the souls of those you drag down with you. The holding cell is a cube of bare plasti walls lit by a single flickering lumen. You sit on the narrow bench and contemplate the ruins of your life. Your family, who will now bear the shame of your corruption. Your children, who will grow up marked as the offspring of a heretic. Your colleagues, who will be investigated for possible contamination from proximity to your sin. The ripple effects of your fall will touch dozens of lives, bringing suspicion and scrutiny to anyone who had contact with you. In the Imperium's zero-tolerance approach to corruption, guilt spreads like an infection, and even the innocent can be destroyed by association with the guilty. Hours pass before you learn your fate. Thaddeus returns with a formal verdict, read from an official decree bearing the seals of the local ecclesiarchy tribunal. Your crimes have been weighed against imperial law and found deserving of severe punishment, but not quite worthy of the ultimate sanction. You will be servitorized. The sentence hits you like a hammer blow to the chest. Servitorization, the process of turning criminals into mindless cyborg slaves through surgical removal of higher brain functions and replacement with mechanical components. Your consciousness will be lobotomized, your personality erased, your body converted into a tool of imperial service. It's a fate worse than death, but not the worst fate available. At least you'll continue to serve the Emperor, even if the you that serves will be nothing more than a hollow shell guided by programmed responses. And the woman? You manage to ask, dreading the answer. Thaddeus consults his data slate with clinical detachment. Servitor Secondary Amara Voss has been judged less culpable than yourself, as evidence suggests you initiated the corruption. She will undergo re-education and chemical treatment to suppress improper desires, followed by transfer to a penal colony where her future compliance can be monitored. She'll live. Damaged, chemically altered, exiled to a world of perpetual punishment, but she'll live. It's more mercy than either of you had any right to expect. As you're led away to await the surgical procedures that will end your existence as a thinking being, you reflect on the terrible efficiency of imperial justice. Your corruption has been identified, contained, and processed with mechanical precision. The threat you represented to social order has been neutralized, and your fate will serve as a deterrent to others who might harbor similar thoughts. This is how the Imperium protects itself, not through forgiveness or rehabilitation, but through the complete destruction of anything that threatens its rigid order. This is the price of human desire in a universe where humanity itself is seen as a weakness to be purged. Your last coherent thought, as the sedatives take hold and the surgical servitors wheel you toward the operating chamber, is of Amara's face during that first stolen kiss. For one perfect moment, you had touched something beautiful and real and purely human in a galaxy that offers no place for such things. Was it worth it? As consciousness fades and the mechanical components prepare to hollow out your skull, you realize that even now, even facing obliteration, your heart whispers the same answer it has whispered for months. Yes, it was worth everything, but this is not the end of your story. It's barely the beginning. What you experienced as the natural awakening of forbidden desire, what imperial doctrine classified as moral corruption requiring punishment, was actually something far more sinister. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, human emotion doesn't exist in isolation. It resonates through the warp, that nightmarish dimension where thought becomes reality and feeling becomes power. Your love for Amara, your desperate hunger for connection beyond the sterile boundaries of imperial approval, your willingness to risk everything for moments of genuine intimacy, all of this was observed, catalogued, and cultivated by an intelligence so vast and alien that your human mind could never fully comprehend its nature. Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure, the dark god of excess, was watching you fall. And it was pleased. The entity that mortals know as Slaanesh feeds on sensation, emotion, and experience pushed beyond normal boundaries. It doesn't simply consume random chaos. It carefully cultivates specific types of corruption, nurturing seeds of excess until they bloom into full spiritual damnation. Your case represents a perfect example of the Dark Prince's methodology. Consider the precise conditions that led to your fall. The Imperium's rigid moral structure created a pressure cooker of repressed desires. The emphasis on duty over happiness, on service over self-fulfillment, on spiritual purity over human connection. These weren't accidental features of imperial society. They were the result of 10,000 years of trial and error, designed to create stable, predictable citizens who serve the emperor's will without question. But human nature doesn't disappear simply because it's inconvenient to imperial goals. The desires, the longings, the need for connection and intimacy that define the human experience. These continue to exist beneath the surface of even the most devout citizen. And in the 41st millennium, suppressed emotion becomes psychic energy that bleeds into the warp, where the chaos gods wait to harvest it. Slaanesh doesn't create corruption, it amplifies what already exists. Your attraction to Amara would have remained a minor temptation, easily managed through prayer and duty, if it had been purely natural in origin. But the moment your desire reached a certain threshold, the moment the emotional pressure built beyond normal human parameters, you began broadcasting your corruption directly into the realm of chaos. Think back to that first day when you saw her in a new light. Remember the intensity of the sensation, the way it seemed to overwhelm your rational thought and reshape your understanding of what was possible. That wasn't simply human attraction. That was your psyche resonating with something inhuman, something that fed on your confusion and amplified it back to you in an endless feedback loop. The dreams that followed, the fantasies that consumed your waking thoughts, the way simple attraction evolved into obsessive need, these weren't natural progressions. They were carefully orchestrated by an intelligence that understood exactly which psychological pressure points would drive you toward greater and greater transgression. Every prayer you offered for strength to resist temptation was heard by the Dark Prince and twisted into fresh fuel for your corruption. Every moment of guilt and shame you experienced was transmuted into psychic energy that strengthened the very forces leading you astray. Every attempt to purge your thoughts of sin only intensified the prohibition that made sin more desirable. The Imperium's response to your corruption played directly into Slaanesh's design. The harsh interrogation, the public shame, the destruction of your family's reputation, all of this created exactly the kind of intense emotional experience that feeds chaos. Your suffering, your despair, your final defiant moment of declaring the experience worthwhile despite its cost. This was a feast of sensation for an entity that treats human emotion like a fine wine. But the true horror runs deeper than individual corruption. Your fall didn't occur in isolation. It rippled outward through the psychic dimension, touching other minds that were already wrestling with similar temptations. Somewhere in your district, another imperial citizen felt their own forbidden desires grow stronger in response to the psychic tremors of your damnation. Someone else's marriage began showing subtle cracks as the emotional resonance of your affair whispered suggestions into their subconscious mind. This is how chaos spreads, not through dramatic possession or obvious supernatural intervention, but through the slow corruption of normal human experience. The servitorization process that destroyed your consciousness was intended to prevent further corruption, to cut off the psychic broadcasting that was contaminating others. But it was already too late. 6 months of escalating emotional turmoil had sent waves through the local warp, creating eddies and currents that would influence human behavior for years to come. And your soul, your precious, irreplaceable human soul that you thought was facing mere obliteration. In the moment of surgical death, as the medical servitors carved away your frontal cortex and installed the mechanical components that would replace your personality, something else was happening on a level beyond physical reality. The psychic energy that had been building throughout your fall, all that compressed desire and guilt and desperate love, was harvested by the Prince of Pleasure. Your essence, everything that made you uniquely yourself, was drawn into the realm of chaos where it became raw material for Slaanesh's endless appetite. Not destroyed, but transformed. Stretched and reshaped and mixed with countless other corrupted souls into something that serves the Dark Prince's will, while retaining just enough of your original identity to experience eternal, overwhelming sensation. You are not dead. You are not free. You are not at peace. You are a single note in a symphony of excess that has played for millennia and will continue until the universe itself burns out. The servitor that bears your body continues to perform its assigned duties in the administratum, efficiently processing grain reports with mechanical precision. Citizens who knew you before occasionally comment on how much better you seem. No more distraction, no more emotional instability, just reliable service to the Emperor's will. They don't realize they're looking at an empty shell animated by cybernetic implants. They don't understand that the real Matthias Korven exists now as part of Slaanesh's eternal court, experiencing sensations so intense and varied that human language has no words to describe it. And the woman you loved, Amara, sent to a penal colony for re-education and chemical treatment. She lasted 3 years before the psychological damage proved too severe. The chemical suppressants designed to eliminate improper desires had the side effect of dulling all emotional response. Unable to feel joy, love, or even basic satisfaction, she gradually withdrew from contact with others and eventually took her own life rather than continue existing in a state of artificial numbness. Her suicide was recorded as a failure of the rehabilitation process, another data point in the endless imperial statistical analysis of criminal recidivism. No one suspected that her final act of desperate rebellion would create exactly the kind of intense emotional peak that draws Slaanesh's attention. Her soul joined yours in the Prince of Pleasure's realm, where the love you shared in life has been transformed into something that serves chaos for eternity. The local confessor who oversaw your investigation, Father Dimitri, noted a troubling increase in moral infractions throughout his district in the months following your case. Citizens who had never shown signs of spiritual deviation began requesting private guidance for impure thoughts. Marriage dissolution requests spiked by 30%. Reports of adultery and forbidden relationships increased across all age groups and social strata. He attributed this to the psychological contamination of witnessing public moral failure, not understanding that your corruption had created psychic resonances that continued to influence human behavior long after your physical destruction. The Imperium's response was typically thorough, enhanced surveillance, mandatory additional confession sessions, and preventive chemical treatment for citizens showing early signs of moral deviation. Every punishment created fresh suffering. Every enhancement to imperial control generated new resentment and frustration. Every attempt to prevent corruption provided exactly the conditions that make corruption more likely. This is the true genius of Slaanesh's design. The Dark Prince doesn't need to actively recruit followers or corrupt loyal citizens through direct supernatural intervention. It simply needs to exist as a psychic presence that amplifies natural human emotions beyond the boundaries of imperial acceptance. Then allow the Imperium's own defensive reactions to create the intense experiences that feed chaos. Your story, your fall, your punishment, your destruction was never about you at all. You were simply raw material in a cosmic process that transforms human experience into food for entities that exist beyond morality, beyond reason, beyond any hope of understanding or negotiation. And the most horrifying part, it worked perfectly. In the realm of the Prince of Pleasure, time doesn't flow, it pulses, surges, and eddies like a tide of pure sensation that carries consciousness through experiences no mortal mind could survive intact. Here, in the impossible architecture of Slaanesh's domain, your essence, what remains of Matthias Korven after the harvest of your soul, exists in a state that transcends both ecstasy and agony. You are aware, you remember, and you understand with perfect clarity what you have become. The Palace of Pleasure stretches beyond the horizon in every direction, its crystalline spires and flowing walls constructed from materialized emotion and crystallized sensation. Every surface reflects distorted images of the experiences that created it, moments of passion, despair, triumph, and devastation from across the galaxy, all compressed into architectural form that exists partially in 3 dimensions and partially in states of being that have no names. You walk its corridors. The walk is inadequate to describe movement that occurs through will rather than physical action surrounded by other souls who have fed the Dark Prince's appetite. billions of them stretching back through millennia of galactic history, warriors who fell to pride, artists who sacrificed everything for perfect beauty, lovers who chose passion over duty, ascetics who found in self-denial a form of excess. All of them, like you, convinced that their corruption was unique, special, meaningful. All of them learning, as you have learned, that individual identity becomes meaningless when processed through infinite appetite. The woman beside you might have been Amara once. The features are similar. The essential spark that drew you to her still recognizable beneath layers of transformation that have turned her into something that exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously. She recognizes you too, and in the moment of mutual acknowledgement, you experience a reunion that encompasses every possible variation of joy and sorrow that could result from seeing a lost love again. You feel her delight at finding you preserved, her horror at what preservation has cost, her relief that you're together, her despair that together means eternal service to chaos. All of these emotions exist simultaneously, each one pushed beyond mortal capacity for experience. This is what Slaanesh offers its servants, not simple pleasure or basic pain, but sensation so intense and complex that it rewrites the fundamental nature of consciousness. You experience not one feeling at a time, but cascades of emotion that layer and interact and transform each other in patterns that would drive a living mind insane. The love you feel for Amara is still there, but it's been expanded beyond any limit you could have imagined. You love her with the intensity of every lover who has ever existed, feel for her the devotion of saints and the obsession of madmen and the desperate need of the dying. The emotion encompasses every possible variation and expression of love simultaneously, creating a sensation so overwhelming that it becomes its own form of torture. And the torture is exquisite, and the exquisiteness is torturous. And you wouldn't change any of it, because the alternative existence without such intensity has become literally unthinkable. Around you, the other inhabitants of the palace engage in activities that defy description. Not orgies or tortures in any recognizable sense, but experiences that take the concepts of pleasure and pain and stretch them across dimensions of sensation that mortal language cannot express. A former Imperial general experiences the joy of victory and the agony of defeat from every battle ever fought, simultaneously, while his consciousness is stretched across the experiences of every soldier who ever served under his command. A sanctified wife from a shrine world relives her wedding day, but the ceremony encompasses every possible variation weddings of joy and sorrow, love and duty, hope and despair. She experiences being bride and groom, officiant and witness, the one who loves and the one who is loved, all while remaining fundamentally herself, yet fundamentally transformed. This is immortality in the service of chaos, not simple continuation of existence, but existence amplified beyond any mortal conception of what being alive could mean. The Dark Prince moves through its domain like a living storm of perfect beauty and perfect horror, its presence simultaneously desired and feared by every soul in its service. When it focuses attention on you, and it does, periodically, like a connoisseur sampling a particularly fine vintage, you experience the full weight of its appreciation for the corruption that brought you here. It remembers every moment of your fall with perfect clarity. The first stirring of forbidden desire, the elaborate rationalizations that allowed you to pursue what you knew was wrong, the sweet agony of stolen moments with Amara, the delicious tension between guilt and satisfaction that accompanied each transgression. To Slaanesh, your entire life, your dutiful service, your loving family, your careful adherence to imperial doctrine, was merely the setup for the exquisite moment when it all collapsed. Everything you were before the corruption began was valuable only as contrast, making the fall more dramatic and therefore more satisfying. But the true horror of your fate isn't the intensity of sensation or the loss of individual agency. It's the understanding that spreads through your transformed consciousness like poison. You are not a victim. Every choice that led you here was genuinely yours. The corruption didn't overpower your will, it revealed what your will truly desired when freed from artificial constraints. The chaos gods don't force souls into service. They simply provide what those souls actually want, stripped of self-deception and social conditioning. You wanted to love Amara more than you wanted to serve the Emperor. You wanted personal happiness more than you wanted duty to family. You wanted to feel truly alive more than you wanted to be truly good. And when forced to choose between damnation with what you desired and salvation without it, you chose damnation, and you would choose it again, and again, and again. The knowledge eats at whatever remains of your original identity like acid. In life, you could tell yourself that you were a good person who had made bad choices, a faithful citizen led astray by supernatural forces beyond your understanding. But here, surrounded by the materialized truth of what exists in every human heart, such comfortable lies become impossible. You are here because this is where you belong. You are serving chaos because chaos offers what you actually value. You are lost because you chose to be lost. The ripples of your corruption continue to spread through real time, touching new minds across the galaxy. In the administratum station, where your servitorized body continues its mechanical duties, a young clerk begins experiencing dreams that seem strangely familiar. On a shrine world 3 systems away, a sanctified wife finds herself distracted during prayers by thoughts that feel alien yet somehow natural. In the underhives of a distant forge world, couples who have never heard your name begin arguing about desires they can't quite articulate. Each new corruption feeds the endless appetite of the Prince of Pleasure. Each fresh soul harvested adds to the symphony of excess that plays throughout the warp. Each person who chooses desire over duty validates the choice you made and makes it easier for the next person to make the same choice. This is the true victory of chaos, not the conquest of the material universe, but the demonstration that given genuine freedom to choose, humanity will always choose its own destruction. Every soul in Slaanesh's service is proof that human nature, when freed from artificial constraints, naturally tends toward excess, corruption, and ultimately, chaos. The Imperium's harsh restrictions aren't cruelty, they're the only thing standing between humanity and its own desires. The Emperor's rigid doctrine isn't oppression, it's the desperate attempt to save the species from itself. The Ecclesiarchy's constant vigilance isn't paranoia, it's the recognition that every human heart contains the seeds of its own damnation. In the Palace of Pleasure, surrounded by souls who made the same choices you made, you understand with perfect clarity why the Imperium must be what it is, why freedom is too dangerous to allow, why individual happiness must be sacrificed for species survival, why love itself can be heresy in a universe where love serves chaos. And understanding this, you still wouldn't change anything. Because even knowing the cost, even seeing the consequences, even existing in eternal service to entities that represent everything hostile to human flourishing, the moments of genuine connection you shared with Amara remain worth more than all the virtue you sacrificed to obtain them. This is the ultimate horror of chaos corruption, not that it destroys your capacity to choose good over evil, but that it reveals you never wanted to choose good in the first place. When stripped of fear, social pressure, and external consequences, when faced with the pure choice between virtue and desire, humanity chooses desire. Every time, without exception, and calls it love. The servitor that once bore your name continues its duties in Administratum Station Gamma 7, processing grain distribution reports with mechanical efficiency. Its cognitive implants perform calculations at superhuman speed, while its lobotomized brain provides just enough biological processing power to handle tasks too complex for pure machinery. It is, by every measure that matters to the Imperium, a perfect citizen, productive, obedient, and utterly incapable of the moral deviation that once threatened social order. The other workers have grown accustomed to its presence. New employees sometimes comment on how much better it seems compared to the troubled man who previously held the position. More focused, more reliable. free from the emotional instability that once made it difficult to work with. They don't realize they're praising the benefits of surgical personality removal. This is victory in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, not the triumph of good over evil, but the successful suppression of humanity itself in service to survival. The wider implications of your case continue to ripple through Imperial society with effects that extend far beyond your personal tragedy. The investigation that exposed your corruption identified 17 other citizens showing early signs of similar deviation. Some were processed through the same servitorization that claimed your consciousness. Others underwent chemical treatment and psychological reconditioning. A few were deemed too corrupted for rehabilitation and were quietly executed, their deaths recorded as industrial accidents to prevent martyr worship. Your family bore the consequences with stoic acceptance that would have made you proud in life. Lydia remarried within the year, a practical arrangement to provide stability for your children and remove the stigma of association with a known heretic. Your eldest son excelled in his imperial doctrine studies, perhaps hoping that exceptional piety could wash away the stain of his father's corruption. Your daughter entered a convent at age 12, dedicating her life to the Emperor's service in explicit rejection of the path you chose. They survived. They adapted. They continued to serve the Imperium with the loyalty you failed to maintain. And in doing so, they validated the system that destroyed you. The local confessor implemented new protocols following your case, more frequent confessions, enhanced psychological monitoring, and prophylactic chemical treatment for citizens showing stress indicators that might predispose them to moral corruption. Marriage counseling became mandatory for all couples, with trained observers monitoring for signs of emotional deviation that could lead to adultery or other relationship crimes. These measures successfully reduced incidents of documented moral failure by 43% over the following 5 years. They also increased suicide rates by 18%, created a 67% spike in requests for psychotropic medication, and led to the identification of 23% more citizens requiring enhanced spiritual guidance. The Imperium recorded these statistics as evidence of successful policy implementation, proof that the system could adapt to new threats and maintain social stability through enhanced control. No one asked whether a society that requires such measures to maintain order might be fundamentally flawed. No one questioned whether stability purchased at such prices could be called success. No one wondered whether preventing corruption by eliminating the capacity for genuine human emotion might represent a cure worse than the disease. Because in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, such questions are themselves heretical. To wonder whether the Imperium's methods might be excessive is to doubt the Emperor's wisdom. To suggest that individual happiness might have value independent of social utility is to invite the attention of the Ordo Hereticus. To propose that human nature might be worth preserving rather than suppressing is to advocate for the very chaos that the Imperium exists to prevent. The Imperium is not evil, it is necessary. The Emperor is not a tyrant. He is the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. The ecclesiarchy does not crush the human spirit. It preserves what little of humanity can be safely allowed to exist. This is the fundamental truth that your story illustrates. In a universe where human emotion literally feeds hostile entities that seek to destroy the species, where individual desires can open doorways to hell, where love itself can become a weapon turned against everything humans value, there are no choices that do not carry terrible costs. The Imperium's harsh restrictions create suffering, but they prevent the far greater suffering that would result from chaos corruption spreading unchecked. The surveillance state violates privacy and autonomy, but it identifies threats before they can metastasize into cult activity that could damn entire worlds. The servitorization process destroys individual consciousness, but it eliminates corruption vectors while maintaining the productive capacity necessary for species survival. Every cruelty of the imperial system exists because the alternative is worse. Every sacrifice of individual rights serves the preservation of the species. Every suppression of human nature prevents the expression of that nature from destroying humanity itself. But understanding the necessity doesn't make the choices any less horrific. The young woman who undergoes chemical castration to prevent improper desires is still losing a fundamental part of her humanity. The married couple forced to maintain emotional distance to prevent excessive attachment are still being denied the connection that makes life meaningful. The children raised in doctrine so rigid that they never learn to think independently are still being robbed of the capacity for growth and self-determination that defines human potential. The Imperium succeeds at its primary mission, keeping humanity alive, but fails completely at every goal that would make being alive worthwhile. Your case exemplifies this impossible dilemma. Left to follow your natural inclinations, you would have destroyed yourself and contaminated others with corruption that serves chaos. Constrained by imperial doctrine, you lived a life drained of genuine joy or meaningful connection. Caught between these alternatives, you chose corruption and damnation. And in a universe where those are the only options available, it's impossible to say you chose wrongly. The tragedy isn't that you fell to chaos. It's that falling to chaos was preferable to the alternatives the Imperium offered. The horror isn't that you were punished for your choices. It's that punishment was the only response a system dedicated to human survival could provide. The true Grimdark element isn't that evil triumphed over good. It's that good and evil became impossible to distinguish when filtered through the requirements of species-level survival. What does it mean to be human in a universe where humanity itself is the enemy? What value does individual consciousness have when that consciousness is the vector through which hostile forces attack the species? What hope can exist for personal fulfillment when personal desires inevitably serve the entities that seek to destroy everything humans have built? These questions have no answers because the Warhammer 40,000 universe is constructed specifically to make such questions unanswerable. It presents scenarios where every choice leads to damnation, where virtue and vice serve the same malevolent ends, where the only victory possible is the prevention of total defeat. You loved Amara, and that love served Slaanesh. You maintained duty to your family, and that duty created the repression that made corruption more appealing. You sought happiness, and happiness was revealed as another face of spiritual poison. You accepted punishment, and punishment fed the same dark forces your rebellion had served. The Imperium that destroyed you also represents humanity's only hope for survival. The chaos that consumed your soul also offers the only experiences that make existence feel meaningful. The choice between order and chaos, duty and desire, virtue and corruption, is also the choice between despair and different despair, between one form of spiritual death and another. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, not just the external conflict between armies and species, but the internal war between what humans are and what they must become to survive. There is no peace among the stars, not just because of alien threats and demonic incursions, but because peace itself would require reconciling irreconcilable opposites. There is only the laughter of thirsting gods, not just chaos entities feeding on human suffering, but the cosmic joke that the species capable of the greatest love and creativity and joy is also the species least able to safely express those qualities. Your story ends where all human stories in this universe must end, in service to powers that care nothing for human happiness or human dignity. Whether that service takes the form of mechanical obedience to the Emperor or ecstatic surrender to chaos makes little difference in the final analysis. Either way, the individual is consumed by forces too vast to comprehend and too fundamental to resist. The only choice that remains is how to face that consumption, with the desperate hope that sacrifice might preserve something worth preserving, or with the dark recognition that if damnation is inevitable, it might as well be chosen rather than imposed. Either way, in the grim darkness of the far future, Damnation is the only universal constant, and perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Because in a universe where gods themselves are evil, what else could await the creatures unlucky enough to be born human?